War. War never changes. In the year 1945, my great-great-grandfather, serving in the army, wondered when he'd get to go home to his wife and the son he'd never seen. He got his wish when the US ended World War II by dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world awaited Armageddon. Instead, something miraculous happened. We began to use atomic energy not as a weapon, but as a nearly limitless source of power. People enjoyed luxuries once thought the realm of science fiction. Domestic robots, fusion-powered cars, portable computers. But then, in the 21st century, people awoke from the American dream. Years of consumption led to shortages of every major resource. The entire world unraveled. Peace became a distant memory. It is now the year 2077. We stand on the brink of total war. And I am afraid. For myself, for my wife, for my infant son. Because if my time in the army taught me one thing, it's that war never changes.
Explosions. We're trying to get...
Hey everybody, Madrebred here. Who's ready for Flame War? Trick question, everyone is. You knew what you were getting into because this is a video.
It's okay.
Just help me pack it up! God, I can't lose these. That'll be all I have left. If you're in the vault program, head to the gate. That's absurd! I am
Not on
vault
the list.
theft.
You don't get in.
I'm going in. You can't stop me. Okay.
Hey,
If you're in the program,
letting
step
you
forward.
in?
Otherwise,
Not
return
me.
home.
We need to get in. We're on the list.
Infant, adult male, adult female. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Good luck now. God
You
help
two,
us all.
follow me. Come on.
What's gonna happen to all those people outside the
Doing
gate?
everything we can. Now keep moving.
This way!
Step on the platform in the center.
All right, that's it. Send it down.
Almost there. We're gonna be okay. I love you. Both of you.
We love you too.
Hold on.
Hi guys, how's it going? Happy Monday. I thought we'd start with a little Fallout 4 atomic bomb, because today we're going to be talking about what if questions. What if World War III actually happened, specifically in relation to the Cold War? Because the Cold War and the fear of the Cold War is all about World War III and like whether or not World War III could happen. So today we're going to kind of investigate, looking at the Vietnam War, looking at the Cuban Missile Crisis, looking at those hotspots during the Cold War, and kind of thinking about what, like, if World War III was going to happen, when would it have happened? And then we'll talk a little bit about what if and how that happens. How's everyone doing today? I do want you guys to know that I have a Nearpod set up. So if you come here to the Nearpod, I got to fix that. Hold on. Boom. If you come here to the Nearpod, here we go. You're going to notice the code is in the chat. I'm having Ryan, he's posting it. So the code is PQTSK. Check out in the chat if you want to take a look at that. But basically, if you have a specific question about World War III, it can be anything at all, right? It could be like, what would happen? What countries would be involved? Who would attack first? Things like that. It could be who would win the war. What's the outcome? Anything like that. It could be about the Cold War, like Mr. Volger. Would World War III have happened in Korea? The Korean War would have happened in the Vietnam War. Like, what would have started it? So any question at all, any what if question, we're going to be talking about World War III. What if questions are so powerful when you're talking about social studies. When I got to graduate school, one of the things that we really focused on primarily in history classes was what if. Because when you really start to play around with the question of what if, meaning take history and change it. Like, what if the Nazis won World War II? Okay, that's a what if question. Because what that forces you to do is you need to think about the cause and effect relationship of what actually happened, and then you need to change it based on, okay, well, if the effect is different, and the causes are different, right? Then it leads to a whole new chain of cause and effects, and it really helps your brain think on a higher level, thinking about the future and our history and our social studies in general, right? They always say that history repeats itself. Now, obviously, that's not true, right? The Roman Empire came and went, and the Roman Empire is not going to happen again, at least not in the way it did. And so they don't mean that it literally repeats itself. What they mean is that the themes and the lessons that we learned through history come up time and time again, right? There's always going to be a war. It's important that we realize that. Now, the wars are different, and every war is unique, but the theme of war, two countries fighting, killing, innocent people dying, things like that obviously have an impact. And those are lessons we can learn from, okay? And that's why what if questions are so powerful. It's hard, though, because some of us like to think black and white. We like to think, Mr. Volger, when was America born? 1776. We like to know dates because that's easy for us to remember. But that's not high-level thinking. High-level thinking is, okay, we know America was born in 1776, but what if we lost the American Revolution? Would we have had a second American Revolution? Would the colonists have just given up and let England take over? Or would we have regrouped and in 10, 20 years, maybe the War of 1812 would have been the second revolution, right? So these are what-if questions that we can think. And obviously there are no right or wrong answers, but by logically thinking it out, we can really start to expand our horizon and thinking about the future, people, society, and all those things. So how's everyone doing here on this wonderful Monday? So when you post to my Nearpod, I have to approve it. So I'm going to click on this right here, and then it says so there we go. Thank you, Mr. Didi, but I'm not going to approve that. And there you go. So I'll post them, and then we'll come back here, and we'll take a look, and I'll keep posting what you guys write, and we'll take a look and kind of review. So it's a way that you guys can participate in the lesson in a very simple way. We're going to talk a little bit about Vietnam, right? World War III, the Cold War is all about World War III. I mean, we talked already about MAD, right? Mutually assured destruction, this idea that we're going to be we can't use nukes because if we use nukes, then everyone dies. But we have nukes. And what's even weirder about that is we can't use nukes, but we have to build new nukes. Because if we don't build new and better nuclear devices, right, atomic weapons, then Russia's going to be building them. And if Russia gets too advanced, then MAD no longer applies. Because if we can't assure that if Russia attacks us, we'll destroy them, then MAD falls apart, and then Russia will attack us because they can take out our defense systems and they could win the war without the fear of dying. And so it's funny, MAD means that we have to build nukes, we have to build the best weapons, but we can't use them. But we have to keep building them, so we don't use them. It's a complicated idea. Not everyone understands it, so there you go. Try to think that through. What if the U.S. and China didn't step in the Korean War? So I'll wait till I get like 6 or 7 before I start answering them. Mark, let's stay on topic and be positive. Thank you, Mark. Epic Monday. Make sure. All right, so also, question of the day is back. I will be posting the question of the day at the end of class, so make sure that you're watching these live streams. I also am going to be showing a live video at the end of this live stream that if you're watching this recorded, not live, you won't see. So I will put the link to that video in the description in the video below. And so if you're watching this later in the day, click that link when I'm done teaching, and then you could watch that video and see it. But for copyright reasons, I'm not going to be showing it live. But if I won't be showing it recorded. If you're watching live, I will show it. I'll just edit it out of the video after. I hope that makes sense. I know it kind of doesn't, but we're going to keep going. All right, let's see what I got here. We got here. Still playing around. Chrome wasn't working for me, so I had to go to, look, I'm using Edge, Spencer. Look at this. You see this right here? Right there? Huh? First time I'm using Microsoft Edge. It actually worked pretty smooth. No video hiccups or nothing. So I'm pretty happy about that. Let's go to Google. Go to my Drive. Drink a cup of coffee. Delicious. Should we go to my new field? Check this out. You like this? Here we go. I gotta fix that again. Trying to buy time so you guys can get some questions in. Here we go. Yeah, we use this for the weekly wrap-up video, so I'm using it right now. It's pretty nice. Makes me feel good inside, being outside in nice weather. Like yesterday. How nice was the weather yesterday? Oh, my Lord, it was so good. Here we go. Do you guys want to talk about the draft first? I think we're just going to talk about the war first, because I feel like we should talk about the war before we get into the draft. We already did this one. Hold on. Just bringing up my there we go. All right, so the Vietnam War is an interesting war, okay? America gets involved in Vietnam in 1955, but we really don't. We're talking about U.S. Special Forces, maybe, 100 soldiers, very small number. It isn't until like 1963 that the United States starts putting more numbers in. And again, it isn't until 1968 till the United States really starts pouring thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of Marines and Army soldiers and everyone into Vietnam. Right, we talked about how Vietnam was a French colony, and after World War II, obviously Vietnam no longer wanted to be controlled by European colonists, and so Vietnam was a very poor country, and communism appealed to them. And so a leader in the north, supported by China, called Ho Chi Minh, starts the communist revolution in North Vietnam. And France is trying to, they say they're trying to stop the spread of communism, when really it's a colonial war. The United States gets involved in Vietnam when France really can't handle it, and France is going to lose. And so the United States, because of the domino theory, right, this belief that if Vietnam becomes communist, other countries in the region like India and Laos and Cambodia and the Philippines will become communist. So the United States immediately starts to get a vested interest in going to Vietnam. It's very weird for Americans because most Americans had never heard of Vietnam until this happened, right? If you went back into 1955 and you asked someone, what's Vietnam, they're not going to know. Just like you guys don't really know where like Estonia is, right? So this country only becomes popular in American history because of the Vietnam War. I'm going to pause the chat for a while just so we can focus on the lesson. So the chat is now paused. There we go. If you need to find the Nearpod code, it is Ryan Standard's last message on the chat. Check that out. So immediately the United States goes to Vietnam. We are a superior country. We're kicking butt. We're so much better than the other countries. Really, it's like we're gonna. It's not even gonna be close. You know what I mean? Like we are the world superpower with nuclear weapons. We beat the Nazis, right? We nuked Japan. We're not scared of some small poor country like Vietnam. And so we get into Vietnam, and right away for the first, 65, 66, 67, we're doing really well. We secure South Vietnam and make South Vietnam free. We start bombing North Vietnam. We really look like we're doing well, and it looks like the war is going to be won. And then the Tet Offensive happens. The Tet Offensive is on the Vietnamese like New Year, and basically what happens is the Vietnamese strike a counterattack in like 65 locations all throughout Vietnam on the same day, the same time. And what this does is this happens in 1968. And this shocks America, right? Because we think we're winning the war. We think the North Vietnamese are about to lose. And all of a sudden, they attack us in 60 plus different places around the country at the same time. And some of the attacks are huge and they win. And a lot of U.S. soldiers died during the Tet Offensive. It happens in like one day. It's a disaster for the United States because we realize like overnight that, wait a minute, I don't think we're winning this war right now. We thought we were winning. But what happened is the North Vietnamese, they shifted strategy. They're not planning to fight America like in World War II or like the North Koreans where their army comes up against our army. In Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh is going to use guerrilla tactics, guerrilla warfare. His soldiers are going to hide in the jungle and dig trenches and dig holes and dig tunnels. And they're going to attack us and run away into the jungle and then come back around and attack us. They're going to have civilians sneak bombs onto military bases. And like this whole guerrilla warfare style really starts to take hold in Vietnam. And the United States' giant military might really isn't ready for it, and we're not prepared for it. And it becomes a disaster because you can be Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. That doesn't mean that a mosquito can't sting you. A mosquito's tiny, and even though Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is a giant man who can beat up probably most people on planet Earth, if you're small enough, you can sneak in and sting him and leave and keep annoying him. And the thing is, the North Vietnamese, they don't want to beat the United States. That's not their goal. The North Vietnamese simply want to annoy the United States long enough for us to give up and leave Vietnam, and then they get to take over and become communists and win the war. All right, so the Tet Offensive, a lot of attacks, sneak attacks. You have North Vietnamese here on boats at nighttime, sneaking up rivers. They know the lay of the land. They've lived in the jungle their whole lives. We're U.S. soldiers are not ready for the jungle. We're ill prepared. In Europe, think about World War II. We fought in Europe, which is a colder, drier climate. Much kind of similar to Middle America. We fought in Korea, which is a very cold climate, mountainous. Now we're fighting in jungles and swamps in a extremely hot climate. It rains all the time. That scene in Forrest Gump. I love that scene in Forrest Gump. Hold on, let me use my new edge. This is for you. Ready? Hold on. We got a couple more questions. Do we have shelters or anything like that? We're going to get to that. Would America be the last country? Good, we're going to get to that. All right, we're going to get to that. So let's go here. Ready? Let's go here. And we're going to write in Forrest Gump rain scene. It's like my favorite scene in the movie. Hold on.
And it didn't quit.
Let's get higher quality. Hold on. We can do better than that. Here we go. Here we go. Ready? It's a little low, right? Maybe we can get better than that, too.
One day, it started raining, and it didn't quit for 4 months. We've been through every kind of rain there is. A little bit of stinging rain, and big old fat rain. Rain that flew in sideways, and sometimes rain even seemed to come straight up from underneath.
Something happening here.
This one day, we was out walking like always, and then, just like that, somebody turned off the rain and the sun come out.
So you got to realize it rained all the time in Vietnam. And a fun little story that I have, when I went to Iraq, I was trained by a lot of soldiers who were, went to Vietnam. You know, the older guys, they went to Vietnam. That's where they learned. And they used to tell us to make sure that we have to oil the guns, constantly, because the rain makes the guns rust. But then we get to the desert, there's no rain, and of course there's dust everywhere and sandstorms. And if you oil your gun, dust sticks right to the gun, your gun jams. And so, a lot of the lessons, every war is different, right? A lot of the lessons we learned in Vietnam did not apply to the desert wars that we fought in, the war against terrorism. So Tet Offensive wakes us up. There you go. The United States is brutal to Vietnam. We bombed the North Vietnamese more. We dropped more bombs on the North Vietnamese than all of the bombs the Allied forces dropped on the Nazis during World War II. We just bombed them. And this goes for that question that a lot of students always ask. They always say, Mr. Loger, terrorism. Why don't we just bomb Afghanistan? Why don't we just kill Afghanistan? Right? I don't understand. Mr. Loger, why don't we just bomb everyone? Let's just bomb them back to the Stone Age, Mr. Loger. I don't understand, Mr. Loger. Meh. Well, the answer to your question is it doesn't work. It doesn't work. In Vietnam, we did. We bombed them, and they still survived. They dug trenches, they dug bunkers, they dug holes in the ground, they dug in, they hid, and we bombed, and hundreds of thousands of innocent people died, because of our bombing, because we thought it was effective, and it wasn't. And sometimes, you can't use a machete when a scalpel is needed. If you have a little thing that doctor needs to get in and cut something out in your skin, they're not going to come in with a chainsaw, because it's not going to work. It's too much. You need precision. And back during the Vietnam War, we didn't have precision. Today, with our smart bombs, we have much, much, much better precision than we did back then. Ho Chi Minh Trail, one of the ways that the North Vietnamese kind of got around the United States attacks, if you look at a map here, notice the pink right here is Vietnam. Okay, but Ho Chi Minh, his army didn't walk in Vietnam and come down to attack South Vietnam because we're bombing Vietnam. Instead, they went into Laos and Cambodia, where the United States military was not allowed, and they walked through those countries and then came into Vietnam to attack Vietnam. And and it's not like the U.S.-Mexican border, the U.S.-Canadian border. Instead, you got to realize that this is an area where it's all jungle. So the North Vietnamese could hide in the jungle, go into Laos and Cambodia where they're safe from American bombing, and then come back into Vietnam to attack the Americans. It was a complete disaster for the United States. And this is known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail. You can see here, they did not have, hi JJ, they did not have fancy technology, yet they still were effective in getting their equipment and their things across. We had fancy tanks and trucks, none of which really worked in the jungle, which is why Vietnam, the one piece of U.S. technology that becomes synonymous with the Vietnam War and the imagery of the Vietnam War, of course, is the helicopter. Okay? Look at this. They're using elephants. I mean, we're trying to drive around in tanks. We can't get anywhere. They live in this land, you know. We are so ineffective in fighting the Vietnamese that after a while it becomes so expensive. And we're going to learn tomorrow about the war, the draft, and the anti-war protests at home, and the cost the Vietnam War has on the American population. And so here, America finally, we're not prepared for the Vietnamese conditions. We can't shut down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We're untrained to respond to guerrilla warfare, and 58,000, sometimes people say 68,000 U.S. soldiers died. Twice that number. We're talking 150,000 get wounded. And then years later from the Vietnam War, we really start to study PTSD and the trauma that the Vietnam War causes. Today, they say something like, 10 Vietnam veterans die a day. And suicide is a very high rate, drug addiction from the PTSD that they have. It's very sad. So that's a little smash course on Vietnam here. We're going to go back to my Nearpod. We're going to see how it's going. Here we go, Nearpod. All right. Mr. Didi has a lot of questions. Someone else besides Ryan, Rob, I want variety. A lot of you guys, fourth quarter, we're grading fourth quarter based on participation, and it's things like this. So please make sure that you are participating in my lesson. I'm going to start to get some parent complaints, and we're going to start to get kids like, Mr. Volger, it's not fair. Why did my grade drop when I'm working from home? And the answer is going to be participation. You can write the best essay in the world, but if you're not participating from home, that's where it's going to affect your grade. So please, please, please participate. You're going to see kids who are struggling, but they're always here participating. They're going to do better than the kid who disappears. So you need to make sure you participate. All right, Jay, we're going to go one by one through these World War III questions. You ready?
Okay.
All right, here we go.
Wait, World War III?
Yeah, we're talking about what if World War III happened.
Oh.
No, it's scary. All right, here we go. I'm going to open up the chat again. All right, chat's open. All right, here we go. Ryan, would the United States have brought back drafting if there was World War III? Absolutely, Ryan. Drafting is a necessity if we're desperate enough. If you need to draft, you draft. The thing is, in your lifetime with the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, the United States has been able to fight those wars without the need of draft. We've been depending on mercenaries like contractors, like Blackwater, and we've also been dependent on our fancy technology. And so we have not needed to draft. But trust me, if the United States needed to draft soldiers again, they would do it in a heartbeat. The only difference this time is that I would think that they would draft both girls and boys, since girls are much more equal today than they were back then. So that question is complete. Here we go. I'm going to delete them as I complete them so I know. Rob, he asked, the ridiculous amounts of nukes being created brought us to be ridiculously close to being in the start of World War III. Absolutely. It's kind of funny. They build more and more nukes, Rob, to prevent world war with this idea of MAD, mutually assured destruction. But the truth is, the more of something you have, the more likely you're going to use it. And if you think about that, that's really horrifying and scary. And that's kind of the situation we're in today, where Russia and the United States have 10,000, 20,000 nuclear devices. Only one of them needs to be used. Super scary. All right, Miss Chernus. Good job, Rob. What if the U.S. and China didn't step in the Korean War? I would say Korea would become communist. All of it, North and South. You got to understand, back then, after World War II, people were suffering, and communism seemed like a good answer for them. So I definitely think South Korea would have become communist. The North Koreans would have gotten involved. I also think China would have really gotten involved anyway, because it's right next door to them. It's like Canada to the United States. And so even though maybe we shouldn't have gotten involved, but they definitely did. I think Korea was a good thing, because South Korea today, being free, is one of our best friends. Samsung is a South Korean company. South Korea, Seoul. The Olympics was just there a couple years ago. We love South Korea, and it would not exist the way it does today if the United States didn't intervene in the Korean War. Hope that answers your question. All right, Derek's first question here. Do we have shelters or anything like in the game that will protect us? Us, as in you and me? No, we do not, Mr. Derek. Some people in the United States during the 1980s and 60s and 70s did build bomb bunkers, bomb shelters in their yards and things. The government has bomb shelters, so like the White House has a bomb shelter and the Capitol building, and they would know how to like get the important people to safety, and I'm sure they have contingency plans. I believe one of the things they do with the president is they don't put him in a bomb shelter. They put him on Air Force One and they put him in the sky because there's no way to kind of hit him out of the sky because you don't know where he is. You know what I mean? And that's kind of a way they do it. But average people like you and I, we really don't have bomb shelters for us unless you took that upon yourself to build one in your yard, which, Derek, I don't know about you. I do not have a bomb shelter. The best thing you could do in a situation like that is go into your basement and hang out by concrete. All right, Christian. Would America be one of the last countries to fall because in all of the world wars, the biggest countries fall at the end? I don't know, Christian. That's a great question. I think in a way we might be one of the first countries to fall simply because we're going to be the focus of everyone, meaning that our enemies are going to attack us first because we're the threat. But I'm sure we would be able to attack them back and it's complicated. I would definitely say that America would be one of the worst places to live during a world war simply because our cities are going to be bombed. And, Long Island is a very populated area. We have Brookhaven National Lab. We have different areas where countries would view as a threat. And so, I would say, if you lived in Canada, you probably had a better shot than if you lived in America. Not that Canada won't be bombed, but not like New York or Washington, D.C. Rob, what if all the events of Fallout 4 occurred? Well, I love Fallout 4. You notice in the beginning the fancy robot they had? Obviously, we don't have that technology, right? But back in the 1950s, people didn't know where technology was going. One thing that's really interesting about that first video I showed you, do I still have it up? Hold on. This one, right?
Powered cars, portable computers.
So you can see here, I mean, look, that's a portable computer. That's the portable computer. So even though they have all this fancy idea for technology, like this robot, okay, which obviously we don't have today, they also projected that they would have portable computers, which is hysterical because their portable computer is this thing, okay? So the idea that in the 1950s they could predict that we would have something like this in the future is just fantasy. They would never even consider that we would have portable computers that are this small, but yet they could believe that they would have fancy robots that flew and cut grass and things like that. So the what if, you're right sometimes and you're not right sometimes. It's kind of tricky. I remember watching Back to the Future, the second one, where he goes to the future and they have flying cars, and it was the year 2020. Like, we have flying cars in 2020? No, I don't even think it was 2020. I think it was like 2015 or something. The point is they didn't predict that we had cell phones because that was too fantasy, but they did predict they have flying cars. So they don't, what if questions you don't always get right. Kind of interesting. All right. Mr. D, all right, we got a bunch more. All right, let me get them in here. We got Delaney. I'm gonna skip Dee because you have too many questions. Rob, I'll keep you. Tyler, I'll get you. Allie, awesome job participating. Where do we keep bombs? I like it. Jonathan, awesome job participating. Allie, and we're gonna go for like 10 more minutes, and we'll go with Ryan. All right, let's get to some to Mr. DD questions here. All right. So, if the United States got into World War III and we did the draft, would we lose because of certain people that think they are better than the entire military? Mr. DD, this is a question. If you go on military websites and things like that, a lot of people fear that because we're so free in America and we have freedoms, that Americans become very... We have all the choices in the world, right? We have all the video game choices. We have all the movie choices, Netflix. We don't exercise necessarily. No one's yelling at us. Our parents tell, if we don't get a grade in school, oftentimes we blame the teacher. We don't blame the student. We like to give medals out, even if you didn't win, like participation medals. All of this stuff has very positive effects on our emotions. But one area it has a negative effect is in the grit and the tough of soldiers in a nation. If you go to harder countries that don't have freedoms like we do, like Russia or North Korea, their soldiers, some people fear, are tougher in some ways because they haven't been spoiled, so to speak. And so some people fear that. I don't believe that is the case. I believe that when you go in the military, one of the things they do in boot camp and special forces training is they get that spoiledness out of you and they toughen you up. But it is important that we keep the military tough because these soldiers in the military they do have to go out and fight these bad people around the world. And bad people around the world, they are not spoiled, and they are tough, and they've been raised since childhood in tough climates and tough situations, and so we have to fight against that. It's a good question, Mr. Didi. We'll come back to you, Tyler. Are we going to talk about the tunnel rats? I mean, the Americans that had to go into the tunnels with just pistols. Yes, we're going to talk about that. Basically, what he's talking about is the North Vietnamese used to dig tunnels, and Americans had to go into those tunnels and kind of flush them out and get the North Vietnamese out of the tunnels. And sometimes the tunnels are like literally tunnels you crawl through. And so we would have these little guys called tunnel rats that would go in with pistols because you couldn't have your whole rifle. That's how small the tunnel was. And they would crawl into these tunnels. We'll talk about that later in the week. Mr. Didi again. By the name they are usually called, they would be very downfall of the America. The U.S. may think they are ready for a war, but the sum of the idiots who think that being a vegan is saving the earth could potentially destroy the country. I don't agree with that, Mr. Didi. I do not think that vegan has anything to do with toughness or anything like that. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a vegan. Watch him on Twitter. The guy eats nothing but plants. And he's one of the toughest dudes I know. So that is just incorrect knowledge, I would say. Of the United States because they support the socialist leader and think he can cancel student debt. Again, I don't think socialism has anything to do with weakness or strongness. You know, the Soviet Union and today Russia, which are both socialist countries, are one of the strongest nations on planet Earth. You know, the Soviet Union competed with the United States for toughness, and they're socialists. So the idea, don't get into the habit of thinking your enemy is weak simply because you disagree with them. You know, you might not like, some people like socialism, some people don't like socialism. But the idea that you think that socialism inherently makes someone weak is just not true. These people would mess up so bad. All right, skip that. Let's go with Ali. How do you think the war would have started? Who do you think would win the war overall? Ali, I don't think anyone would have won the war. Maybe the United States in the sense that we would have won, but we would not have the country we had, meaning we would have gotten so destroyed winning the war that the country that would have survived would nowhere even remotely look like the country we have today. New York, Washington, Boston, Philadelphia, San Francisco, all would be bombed out. People would live in the countryside. It would be a disaster. So I don't think anyone would really win the war, Ali. How do I think it would have started? Honestly, the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think that was the closest that we came to World War III. I think in the Korean War we came really close, but I don't think that would have. We didn't have the technology during the Korean War in like 1950 to completely bomb with nukes every city on planet Earth. But by the 1960s, we did. By the 1960s, America and Russia both had nukes. Thousands of them already, and if the Cuban Missile Crisis led to war, I definitely think it would have created like the video game Fallout 4, and it would have been bad. Delaney, where do we keep the bombs? Well, the bombs are all over the place, Delaney. We have them in submarines, we have them on jet fighters, we have them in silos, which are like missile tunnels built into the ground. We have them on aircraft carriers and battleships. So they're all over the place. They're flying in the skies right now as I speak to you. They are in the ocean right now on submarines and on boats. So our nukes are not in like a storage facility locked up. They are out on military devices, on military bases all across the world. I'm sure we have nuclear devices in Japan. I'm sure we have nuclear devices in Germany on military bases. So we have nukes everywhere. They're not hidden. They're on military vehicles, secure but ready to be used. Good question, Delaney. Ryan, would Italy leave us if we started losing World War I? I don't understand the question, Ryan. Ali, do you think it would have started? How do you think it would have started? Who do you think would win overall? I just answered that. I think Cuban Missile Crisis. I think everyone would lose. Or the winners would be the survivors, and the survivors would kind of start new countries because the countries, if two countries go to war, if Russia and America go to war, after it's all done, America and Russia will no longer exist because people will blame both countries for killing millions and millions of people. All right, almost done, guys. We're going to go for 2 more minutes. Is there a possibility that we could go to war again with Vietnam? No. The United States and Vietnam is much, much, much more friendly today. In fact, Barack Obama, when he was president, visited Vietnam, and they treated him with arms wide open. Even though Vietnam is communist today, we no longer believe in the domino theory. We no longer fear communism because we're much stronger today, and communism has pretty much died around the world. Even China's communism is changing to be more capitalist. So today we're friendly with Vietnam. It's a beautiful place to visit. It's really amazing. South Vietnam on the coast is one of the most pretty places on planet Earth. Mr. Didi, people we have on today. All right, yeah. Delaney, what are the main things that stopped us from going to World War III? Fear, Delaney. Fear. Like mad, mutually assured destruction, and the idea of death. So it's the fear that Russia has nukes and that they will blow us up. And even if we blow up Russia, they can get their nukes in the sky before we blow them up, and we can shoot their nukes out of the sky, but not all of them. And so it's the fear that many of us will die that keeps us out of World War III. All right, we're going to do the last 3. Here we go. Buff, Ryan, and Christian. Here we go. Last 3. Rob, Mr. and Mrs. Soldier, I'm sorry that I am not as many people are taking time to answer on your pod. Okay, thank you, Rob. If World War III happens, who would start it? Terrorism. In 2020, I would say it would be a group of people who do not fear consequences, right? They don't fear retaliation. They don't fear mutually assured destruction. And so that would be terrorists. And then what would happen is terrorists would attack us, and then we would use a nuke, or Russia would use a nuke in retaliation, and then the rest of the world would get upset that a nuke was used, and then that's how World War III would happen, in my opinion. Also, money could lead to it too, because the world, all these countries are obsessed with money. And look at the coronavirus; everything's about money, and the economy and how the economy is affected. And I definitely think if people feel like their money is going to be lost, they would rather die than that, and so that could lead to war too. Tough question though, Buff. All right, if an aircraft carrier was blown up with a nuke inside, would the nuke blow up? No. Nukes do not blow up if the nuke is blown up. The reason why is it's not a firecracker. It's not a bomb. It's not a grenade. It doesn't have black powder in it. It's not flammable. It is a chemical device that injects, like, I don't know how it works, but ejects like uranium or plutonium into an atom and explodes the atoms, right? A hydrogen atom or a nitrogen atom. And so therefore, you can't blow up a nuke and set it off. You would literally have to activate the computer program that triggers the chemical reaction for a nuke to go off. There have been planes that have carried nuclear devices that have crashed. I know there was one over Spain in the 1980s, I believe, that crashed and dropped like 6 nukes or 3 nukes over the Mediterranean and Spain, and people were like panicked. But there was really no threat of those nuclear devices going off unless they activated the bombs. Good question, though, Ryan. All right, last question. Did we sign a peace treaty with Vietnam? And if not, are we technically at war with Vietnam? No. We did sign a peace treaty with Vietnam. The Vietnam War is over officially. North Vietnam won. They conquered South Vietnam, and they turned the whole country communist. And we hated Vietnam, obviously, for years and years. But when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 and the Cold War ended, throughout the 1990s, we started to rebuild our relationship with Vietnam. And then the 2000s, we continued to rebuild our relationship with Vietnam. And then when Barack Obama was president in 2008, 2012, I think he visited Vietnam. So there's been so many years now where Vietnam is a safe place. I always think it's crazy because as a soldier fighting in Iraq, I know that a lot of Vietnam veterans go back to Vietnam to kind of visit the places where they fought, and they feel it's safe and peaceful, and we're friendly with Vietnam now. I think it would be crazy to go back to Iraq. I can't imagine it being safe enough for me to do that. Like, I would never go back to Iraq today because it's still not, I don't think, a place I would want to go and feel safe. So the idea that maybe 20, 30 years down the road, Iraq becomes a safe place, it's just, that's how Vietnam veterans must feel about Vietnam. It's just a crazy idea. All right, so let's go with our question of the day, shall we? You have a question, Jay?
Yeah.
What's your question, buddy?
Is it possible? This is more like a what if.
Okay,
Is
I'm
it
listening.
possible if a plane was launched with like 6 nukes that was going over its country,
Okay.
and some terrorists hopped on the
Hijack the plane. All right,
Hijack the
I'm with you.
plane.
I'm with you.
launched the nukes, got
Okay.
them ready,
Okay.
escaped,
All right. Yeah,
and
I'm
blew
with you.
up the plane.
Okay.
What would the nukes do? If
Well, they would have
activate-
nukes. The bad guys would have the nukes.
I'm trying to say, if they were to activate the nukes, would not drop them, like, so they like got them ready.
Right.
They got off the plane and blew it up. What would happen to the nukes? Would they explode then?
Would they
If
explode
they
them?
activated the nukes and they got off and exploded the plane, what would happen?
What's this week? Well, they would have nukes, and that would be a fear. You know, we have to make sure that we protect the nukes, I guess. You know? All right, so here it is. I'm posting it onto Google Classroom. Let's do this, right? We're going to call this question of the day for week April 27th through May 1st. Please look here to get the question of the day. Each day it will be updated. Okay? And then first we're going to do Monday's question of the day. So first I have to add my... There it is. Let's add that. So there it is. You guys have your assignment attached. Before I mess up, let's attach this to everyone. And then I will give you your question of the day. You guys ready? So, question of the day. Do you think that World War III is possible today? In the year 2020, when the Cold War no longer is happening, do you, if you think that the war is possible, who are involved and on what sides? If you think that WW3 is not possible, what has changed since the Cold War that has made us more safe? There we go, a little spell check here. There we go, there's your question. Again, there's no right or wrong answer to this question, guys. It is simply a what if question. I want your opinion. I want you to think about it. I want you to really think about today, coronavirus, the situation with oil right now, our enemies, North Korea, Iran, Russia maybe, and maybe even China, and think about like what's the situation today. And if you think, no, I don't think World War III is possible today, then I want to know why, like what has changed since the Cold War. So there's your question of the day. I will assign this assignment. Boom, it is now being assigned. That is it for today, guys. All right, so make sure that you watch it. Before we leave, though, I am going to leave you on this video. So if you're watching after the live show, this is where the video is going to end. And please look below in the description for the thing. If you are watching live, I'm going to start a video right now. Again, the link to the video is in the description. So here we go. Let's watch the video right now.
Is it copyrighted?
It is copyrighted.
Oh, no wonder.